part four is called CDST versus other theories. And I have a part four for each theory. And the intention is to um, show the theories or teach the theories or to help understand the theories through the way in which they relate to each other. Um, Sometimes we don't realize that some things don't mix, and sometimes we don't realize that some things do mix. So in that spirit, the first question would be about CDST and sociocultural theory. CDST and sociocultural theory seem to share a view where a learner and context are coupled. At first glance, these theories seem compatible. In your view, are there limits to this compatibility? And if so, what are they from your assessment?
Yeah, thanks. Jim is very good about saying one really needs to understand another theory in order to comment knowledgeably about it. And I concur. And I've tried to understand sociocultural theory, but I'm sure that I've not entirely succeeded. Nevertheless, since you've asked, I'll use my present understanding of SCT to make a few observations about similarities and differences between it and CDST. Yes, as you've said, both theories see the importance of the organism, the individual, interacting with the environment. Both theories also revolve around the social and the cognitive. SCT is a psychological theory. CDST originates in natural sciences, although it's been taken up, as you said earlier, in many disciplines: linguistics, sociolinguistics, psychology, sociology, even humanities.
Mhm.
Within applied linguistics, both theories purport to explain language development, though Vygotsky's derived sociocultural theories understanding Vygotsky derived his understanding from the development of children, which Lantoff and others have extended to L2 development, whereas CDST has been adopted in applied linguistics to illuminate non-natal language development from the start, although it's been used by other DST researchers like Phelan and Smith to understand non-linguistic development in children. Both theories are non-dualistic in the sense that SCT uses the concept of dialectics, as I understand it, in a non-Hegelian way, to suggest that two poles are necessary for something to exist. You can't have one without the other. Sounds like a song. Conversely, complexity theorists interested in language are more likely, here's a difference, I think, are more likely to subscribe to Bakhtinian dialogism, when one doesn't necessarily seek to resolve differences. The goal is to expand reciprocal understanding, to find room for accommodation. Dialogism is important in CDST because it's difference or variation, and then CDST puts a lot of attention on variation that generates development. Conversely, it seems to me that Vygotsky posited the zone of proximal development as a space where the learner is brought into the knowing of the more skilled and knowledgeable other. This may be an important difference, that through its emergentism, CDST highlights a creative dimension to language development rather than a conformity to somebody else. I'm not certain if this is a difference or not. I'm just saying that's a possibility, and it seems to me an important one. CDST deliberately centers the individual learner as the agent who navigates their own unique developmental learning trajectories. CDST also recognizes the importance of cognitive processes of individuals in language learning, such as pattern recognition and creativity, abductive inferencing, and analogizing. In CDST, dynamism or change are central. Both see a reciprocity and indissoluble connection with teaching and learning. CDST calls for an understanding of the learning process in order to inform teaching. SCT sees teacher learning as a dialect. So I thought, well, maybe SCT goes, teaching to learning, whereas CDST goes learning to teaching. But I'm not sure about that either. I mean, in both cases, they're dialectal. There is one includes the other or leads to the other, or is it the same? Maybe one includes the other, one leads to the other. That's different. Both theories arose during different time periods. Vygotsky drew his inspiration from Marx in the early 1900s. CDST projected as more contemporary. Waddington, Bateson, I mentioned earlier, von Bertalanffy. With its ecological orientation and focus on interconnected systems, CDST is an ecological theory fitting for the times we live in. On the other hand, both claim to be in accord with some other theories. Roy Harris's integrational linguistics and Michael Halliday's systemic functional linguistics, for example, both point to those. So I'm sure there's much more, but that's what I have to offer today.
Certain theories focus on developmental sequences to describe language acquisition, observing that clear patterns emerge in the way grammar develops in both L1 and L2 learners. What were the original claims about the universality of these stages, and what would be a CDST account of them today?
Yeah, early modern day L2 research focused on the question of developmental sequences. That was an exciting time. We sought to identify universals. While subsequent research has shown they're not built in, there has also been some commonality among learners, for sure, even those coming from different language backgrounds. However, even the pioneering work of the ZISA researchers, who conducted longitudinal studies of the natural acquisition of German by Gastarbeiter, by guest workers in Germany, developed a model with two dimensions. One was the developmental axis, but the other was variational axis. Richard Young pointed to social convergence as a possible reason for the commonality of the sequences. And Theron and Liu, Zhang in another study, Eskildsen in a third, have shown that learners depart from the order for social interactional reasons. So not innate by any means. A more cognitive explanation might be that some of the commonality can be attributed to the need for learners to have certain building blocks or processing skills in place to move the learner's language system forward. There may be a great deal of flux in the system, period of fluctuation between competing forms, competing patterns, followed by a phase shift. CDST would call it a phase shift in the system where a certain critical threshold is crossed. And then this is followed by a wider reorganization, self-organization that's triggered, illustrating the nonlinearity of a complex system arising from the interaction of the elements in the system. Then two, complexity theory gives a lot of weight to the agency of individuals. We need to understand learners' behavior from an emic perspective, not committing the psychologist's fallacy that assumes that we all experience phenomena in the same way. Learners actively transform their linguistic world. They don't just conform to it. As Thalen puts it from a CT perspective, development can be envisioned as a changing landscape of preferred, but not obligatory, behavioral states with varying degrees of stability and instability, rather than a prescribed series of structurally invariant stages leading to progressive improvement.
So could we think of these seemingly stable patterns as attractors, perhaps?
Yes, yes. And again, not static, right? So you stay there in a stable place. But again, I want to think about it as emic, right? From the learner's perspective, what are they doing? I think that's really important. We can describe it from a researcher's perspective and say, yes, they're in an attractor state or an attractor. But what are they doing? I think it's important to remind us about the learner's perspective on things. And I think CDST invites an emic, that is a learner-centered perspective.
Generative theory seems to be quite diverse nowadays. While we used to say generative approaches would be incompatible with the social turn, now we may not be able to say that with some of the new iterations. For example, Jackendorf. For people interested in working with both generative approaches and CDST, what would be your warning in terms of potential or even very clear incompatibility?
Yeah, I would say CDST would say there are near universals. I gave an example in my 1997 paper having to do with voicing assimilation. And there's also the overwhelming popularity of SVO word order among the world's languages. And identifying these is helpful in teaching. But neither of these, the voicing assimilation or the SVO pattern, is exclusive. And they're more universals with gradations of exception, right? And they come more from Greenberg. They're not innate. They're not part of a universal grammar through an organ in the brain. So Jackendorf's contribution in expanding upon what UG consists of, and he includes phonology, it seems to me it's welcome. Earlier, Kulikover and Jackendorf in their book made a distinction, or said generative grammars, distinction between lexicon and grammar is mistaken, right? So they didn't say this, but they were subscribing more to Halliday's lexicogrammar, where conflating the two was mistaken, they said, or distinguishing the two is mistaken, that we should see them together. So as CDST would have it, language is viewed as an open, continually evolving system rather than a closed one. So that therefore concepts such as end state grammars become anomalous, since open systems are constantly undergoing change, sometimes rather rapidly. Forms in language are therefore to be seen as epiphenomena of interaction, not innate. In addition, CDST would add that there are more, perhaps innate, I'm not sure about this yet, domain general capacities. For example, the ability to imitate or detect and create patterns. Our brains are excellent at that, to detect and create patterns, or to make inferences. These cognitive might be more domain general capacities. And perhaps even the social drive to interact with the conspecific caregivers, as in Schumann et al.'s interactional instinct. That also may be innate. In any event, what is psychologically real language for learners is not identical to what is descriptively real for linguists, UG linguists. It may instead be, being governed by rules, be fastidious of various kinds of item-based constructions. That's what Tomasello's term is. What we see in second language is the waxing and waning of such constructions or patterns. Language is not a linear, language development is not a linear additive process, but an iterative one. Can I add a conclusion?
Of course.
Complexity theory encourages a search for ways to access the relational nature of dynamic phenomena. A search that's not the same as the pursuit of an exhaustive taxonomy of factors. That doesn't mean that we won't necessarily continue to create or identify them, but exhaustive taxonomies of factors will not help us to account for the behavior of any given phenomenon. Focusing on emergence rather than innateness, and focusing on the relationship among components of a system contribute to a new perspective on development. Linear cause and effect is of lesser interest, and ontological reductionism does not produce satisfying explanations that are respectful of the interconnectedness of the many levels, nested levels, and timescales of a complex dynamic system. In addition, the tendency to dichotomize, which has been central to science, that moves forward when it rejects one of the two alternatives. That's been a pattern in science, and it's made tremendous progress, but it will never entirely succeed because it ignores change and the fertile ground of the in-betweenness, the interconnectedness. Complexity encourages or accentuates change, insists on the importance of context, and respects variability. Donella Meadows, a system theorist who, alas, we lost too young in life, wrote, "Today, it's widely accepted that systems thinking is a critical tool in addressing the many environmental, political, social, and economic challenges we face around the world, we can stop being blinded by the illusion of control. Thank you.
Thank you very much.